This broadcast of the Competizione Performance League Jaguar GT3 Revival Series is brought to you by Jaguar Transport and Assure Action Transport Expert. For oversized cargo and trucking logistics specialists of Quebec, visit www.malwar-transport.ca. And for an expert and professional trucking insurance firm specializing in property and casualty insurance solutions for freight across Quebec, Canada, and the United States, visit www.transportexpert.com. Good evening, folks, and welcome to Round 2 of the Competizione Performance League Jaguar GT3 Revival Series, powered by Jaguar Transport and Assure Action Transport Expert, and live exclusively through TRTN. As always, I am Regan Clark. You join us after a whirlwind opening round, after a week-long delay here, as we enter the second round of the championship, ditching the confines of Indianapolis for the small town of Watkins, Glen, New York. And where better then to be at the aptly named Watkins Glen International Circuit. Opened in 1956 as a permanent track, Watkins Glen is a proper hit of old-school Americana, strikingly faithful to its 1971 iteration, with part of said layout, namely the run from turns 1 to 5, being the very same complex as it was in its debut 69 years ago. The track today is comprised of 11 turns and 3.4 miles of FIA Grade 2 tarmac, best known today as the home of all things stock car racing, with NASCAR having raced out of Watkins Glen since its opening year. The Xfinity, Cup and Craftsman Series all find residence at Watkins Glen during the season. Elsewhere, Watkins Glen is hallowed ground for the world of American sports car endurance racing, with IMSA having held the 6 hours of Watkins Glen in parallel to NASCAR also since 1956. Not to be overshadowed by its place in America's motorsports history, like Indianapolis last week, this circuit was also the home of the United States Grand Prix, this time, however, for a much longer stint, from 1961 to 1980, in what was arguably the most dangerous time to be a Grand Prix racer. Today, it hosts Round 2 of the Competizione Performance League Jaguar GT3 Revival Series, and as we check out onto the track here, we see Clinton Bourne making his way around one of the newest additions to the track, introduced in 1992, the Inner Loop Chicane. Having a look then where we stand after a very exciting and tantalising opening round of the championship finds Christian Lebay atop the championship charts with an inaugural race win. 40 points for the 119 puts him ahead of Giovanni Badiali in second and Hayden Prodger in third. Byron Forrest in fourth place, and rounding out that top five after round 1 of the championship is Kevin Quain. Carl Martel in sixth place, those two sharing in a fantastic battle in Indianapolis last week. Clinton Bourne on your screens at the moment finds himself in 7th place in the championship ahead of Alex Albert and Carl David Bourdreau, 8th and 9th for the pair. Those two only 2 points apart from one another, 4 points front to back in 7th, 8th and 9th. Rounding out that top 10 then, Julio Bahena, who has found himself, albeit after round 1, at the centre of quite a bit of controversy. As we take a look around the circuit here, we can see Andrew Veldkamp making his way out of turn 5. From the pit lane, we can see Timo de Tosto as well, looking to join us for this round of the championship. Kevin Quain, who we saw plenty of over the course of last round, making his way currently down towards turns 9, 10 and 11. But we're going to try and catch on board the man who has made quite the name for himself already, and that being Julio Bahena. Now, this was relayed to us here from Race Control themselves regarding what's going to be happening for Bahena coming up in qualifying today over various incidents that he found himself the epicenter of, namely one of which, if we take a look back to last week, we'll find on the replays here, this was back in Indianapolis last Wednesday, as heading down in towards turn 4, a mighty clash there between himself and the 44 of Daniel Poulin. That currently finds him, though, with quite the hefty penalty. 5 penalty points, as a matter of fact, and according to Race Control, he will be missing out on that qualifying here in round 2 of the championship. This was a statement released after round 1 of 9. Car number 18, Bahena, to receive qualifying ban after exceeding penalty threshold. 5 penalty points in total at Indianapolis. So for Bahena, he'll be missing out on quali today. We do find ourselves with some new names on the field, and we'll get onto that in a moment's time. Looking at where we stand on the calendar as we stay on board here with Carl Martel as he heads down towards the line, we find ourselves now approaching round 2 as we're halfway through our American chapter after leaving Indianapolis. Now we find ourselves here in Watkins Glen in Schuyler County, New York State. We'll be heading to Austin, Texas for the Circuit of the Americas next week on November 4th, and then over to Monterey County, California to round out our American leg of the GT3 Revival Series for Jaguar. That's the Laguna Seca circuit at round 4 on November 11th. Then we'll be heading over to Great Britain at the home of the Jaguar XKG3 as we find ourselves over at Brands Hatch in Kent on round 5 of the championship, then over to Donington in Leicestershire. Round 6, Snetterton over in Norfolk, and Alton Park in Little Budworth. Round 7 and 8. And then we'll be heading into mainland Europe at Heusden Zolder, Belgium, at the Circuit Zolder for December 16th. What is a unique round 9, a triple stint, the first of its kind. Plenty of information to relay in regards to the new qualifying and penalty structures for those double and triple stint rounds coming up later on in the season. Right now, we still find ourselves in the traditional here, the sort of baseline, as it were, for the event regulations. I struggled to find the words for a second there. As we take a look for the regulations for this round, as always, 20 minutes in free practice, of which we're at right now, 20 minutes of qualifying coming up, and 60 minutes of racing, 1 mandatory pit stop for fuel and tyres. On the topic of those brand new drivers, Vincent Simard joining us in the number 120 and the number 23 of Shane James makes 2 new drivers for round 2 of the championship. So it's going to be an exciting time then. We find ourselves currently with about 13 minutes to spare. We're on board at the moment with Carl Martel as he makes his way down out of turn 11. So we'll stay on board here with the number 99 as he becomes our unofficial tour guide of all things Watkins Glen. Heading down that opening straight then. We'll stay on board with the 99. Down towards turn 1 then, known as the 90. Rather aptly named considering it is a, of course, sharp 90-degree right-hander here, opening things out. You can see the track limits are a little bit more liberal on the exit of turn 1, and that owes to its credibility as a stock car circuit, where turning is not exactly one of the best strong suits of these cars outside of an oval layout. Heading up through turns 2, 3 and 4, onto the back straight then we go. Heading towards the inner loop, of course, introduced in 1992 over several safety concerns and even a fatality in the previous season in 1991. Brought about this change here, a little bit of a slowdown zone for our run down into the outer loop here at turn 5. Technically, looking on the maps, the inner loop chicane is never once considered a corner. If it were, it would bring the current corner count, I believe, looking at it here, up to 15 from 11. Out through chute then in towards toe as we enter the international section of the track in what is known as the boot here at turn 7 at the toe. Great overtaking opportunities here as it's a slight uphill open hairpin right, taking us down the boot straight down towards heel. Another fantastic overtaking opportunity. Down towards turn 8 we go then, following with the 99. Still on board with Carl Martel. Down towards turn 9, heading down towards turn 10. Overtaking opportunities will usually come quite thick and fast into those S's and back straight section back in sector 1. But also, it would be naive to assume that turn 1 won't itself become a battleground much the same as it became back in Indianapolis in the previous round just gone. Out of turn 11 goes Carl Martel, and one of the main objectives for all drivers coming into that qualifying session is to keep themselves well clear of that wall to the left-hand side on the exit of turn 11. Far too many times have we seen it across GT3, GT4, and everything in between. Drivers have been rubbing up against that wall and sullying what would otherwise be fantastic qualifying times. So with Martel down towards the line, his last lap of 1:46.112 still keeps him at second fastest, though not a personal improvement. Looking at those timing charts, though, we find ourselves in a story of all things 1:19. LeBay back to the fastest times, this time already leading the charge out through free practice. We'll talk on qualifying predictions in a little while when we get onto the 20 minutes of quali later on today. But it's still looking very hopeful for what is currently right out of the barn gates, the championship leader, and still defending champion after the closure of the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. So having a look around the field, we can see here, this is one of the new drivers on the block. Now, this is Vincent Simard in the number 120. He'll be competing for Canada. What is a striking livery there. I believe that actually to be the Emil Frey Racing livery, of which this Jaguar used in real life as far back as 2012. And it was introduced for the Blancpain Endurance Series. Down towards the inner loop chicane he goes then. This will be his first time here, so it seems, in the Competizione Performance League. Sure is the first time we've ever seen him here in the confines of the Competizione Performance League. Never saw him last season back in GT4, so this is the first of any we will get to see what Simard is capable of. Right now he finds himself 7th fastest, ahead of Carl David Bourdreau and Andrew Veldkamp. Timo de Tosto, as he makes his way down towards the line, is previously 10th fastest. As he crosses the line, however, he's up to 9th over the course of his last lap just gone. De Tosto now down towards turn 1 in the 58. Still yet to see times here from Stephen Black, from Julio Bahena and Daniel Poulin. You see, Bahena is out on track, of course, getting as much time as he can in now, as he will not be able to compete in qualifying later on today, as per the rulings from race control in his post-race investigation. Byron Forrest, who was, like Kevin Quain, a real star of the show back in round one, almost overshadowed the resulting performance from Le Bay, taking home that opening race win of the season. And he was finding himself in quite the myriad of battles. He currently finds himself slap bang in the middle of that top 10, in and around the 5th to 6th mark there. Not too far off, actually, by about 2/10 of a second, I should say, to Clinton Bourne, who's currently in that top 5. A great turnaround for the Australian. He makes his way down towards the line, and bear in mind, not too far away at all from 4th place, courtesy of Richard Cecil from behind him there. The number 5 goes towards the line, also to no improvement. But this is great hustle for Richard Cecil, and this could be quite a hopeful sign for him, as it is a bit of a later than likely entry into the proper championship standings. Looking at where things are outside of that top 10, of course, reveals quite some distressing details. Of course, we had a bit of a down-and-out result after round 1 for Anthony Cotti, Stephen Black, Daniel Poulon, and Fabiano Bartoletti, who were all towards the back of that field. Nonetheless, they do pick up points in the championship, as I believe, looking at it here, this actually accounts for, and looking at the scoring charts that we have to hand here, this accounts for 24 positions. So long as there's 24 cars or less, you are guaranteed points by the end of the round. Cecil currently still 4th fastest. You can see that the gaps, they are starting to condense quite heavily towards the back of that top 5. This is where we see them at their closest. This is a factor here of about 105 thousandths of a second between Cecil and Bourne. Actually, maybe even less than that, come to think of it. Actually, no, he does find himself, I believe it's in the inverse. Let me just run some quick maths on this, because for whatever reason, it's still frying my brain trying to do maths on the fly. It's 95 thousandths of a second, so a little under a tenth between Cecil and Bourne. Currently see an extension out of Le Bay. 144.797 for the number 119. Looking at it here, just dropped under the 7-minute mark. 7 minutes to go before the start of qualifying today here in round 2 of the championship. Well, Daniel Poulon, otherwise now renamed himself to Dan Junior Poulon, 44, finds himself on his 2nd running here in the Competizione Performance League. Made his debut back in round 1. To less than ideal results. Now is the perfect opportunity right here in the home of American stock car racing, outside of the obvious ovals, to make a real mark in today's championship. Find up onto the timing charts. There goes Julio Bahena, the dark horse of the championship after his endeavours through round 1. Right now finds himself with a less than convincing side of things to come. He's 3.1 seconds off the fastest time. Moreover, he's at the back of all available times right now by a factor of over 0.2 of a second. So not looking particularly grand here. Actually, a little under 0.2 of a second if you factor Andrew Veldkamp's time down to the 100th. Richard Cecil, he has now since found a little bit more of a pep in his step, now up to 3rd fastest and ahead of Kevin Quain. Clinton Bourne back to the top 5. You can see those two now divided by one of the closest gaps on this timing chart. That's in a factor of about 0.05 of a second. That's 50 thousandths. If we want to be specific, we can see, though, a little bit of juttering issues there for the 607 of Kevin Quain. Now, this is not news, of course. We have seen the 607 with connection troubles last round, so today doesn't look to be really any different for Quain heading into round 2 of the championship. Richard Cecil, he has found himself in quite a solid position here, especially considering where he finished in the last round of the championship. This is the perfect opportunity, as mentioned before, with Daniel Poulon, for a real turnaround in one's hopes today. Cecil to the line, couldn't find an improvement over his last lap just gone, and having crossed the line a moment ago, the 607 is on to another flying lap, this time still incredibly close by. The gap right now between Cecil and Quain is actually, I believe, yes, at its closest, as it is now looking here 0.02 of a second between the pair. Actually, not even that. That's 100th we're talking there. That is 10 thousandths of a second between Cecil and Quain. At the end of free practice, this is giving us a very solid sign of things to come here in qualifying later on today. Right now, as we've just seen, a recent improvement for Julio Bahena puts him more closely at that 7th position mark in terms of on-track pace. We also see just a recent stint there, Byron Forrest up to second fastest, and looking at it there by 0.003 of a second ahead of Karl Martel. So that is very fine gaps behind the leading 119. It looks to be almost a mirror match of what went on back in Indianapolis, back in round 1 of the championships. It looks to be no different heading into Watkins Glen, and great turnaround there for Byron Forrest. Finds himself second fastest for the start of qualifying today. Quali predictions are looking a little bit jumbled, and that's for the reason that Simbot had a little bit of a snafu earlier on today, as I think it was just about the mid-morning to midday mark, where the Simbot systems, for all intents and purposes, kind of shut down on us here in the Competizione Performance League. I believe they are now since back up, but we had to resort to using quite an early morning data packet, so it may not reflect what things are looking like much closer to the event time. We do try to gauge it within about 12 hours of the event start, whilst the memory is still fresh, but this is a much earlier example. We tried to keep it at most, but within 24 hours of the event start. We'll touch on that a little later on, though, when we get into qualifying. We're on board with Byron Forrest at the moment. We'll cut away from him as we quickly see Carl David Bourdreau pull it into the pit lanes. We were about to see him across the line, but he's aborted that flying lap in the 962. So we cut to Julio Bahena on his way down towards turn 11. Will it be the case where he too aborts a flying lap? But no, out of turn 11, he's keeping it absolutely planted there on that 5 litre. Down towards the line goes Bahena. And sadly, what appears to be no improvement over the course of that last lap. So we cut back on board with Byron Forrest. We've already seen him leap up ahead of his contemporaries up to what is that front row of times. As he crosses the line there, couldn't find even a smidge more ahead of Martel. So still at 3,000. That is calling for a very close qualifying to follow in a moment's time. Looking at where we're at here in free practice. About 2 minutes, 20 seconds left to go before the start of qualifying today. As mentioned in the event brief, 20 minutes of quali set to follow in today's free practice, and it's given us a very clear sign of some ones to watch here. Clinton Bourne and Kevin Quain first on the agenda, and I'd say definitely a lot closer. And second on the agenda, further up the order, Byron Forrest and Karl Martel. Do keep a very close eye on them. What a symphony, says Skino in chat, and you'd be absolutely right. As mentioned back in the opening round of the championship, we're dealing with quite an old school motor to match an old school machine as we check in here with a damaged Daniel Poulin. What has gone on here for the 44? Not the best showcase for the Jaguars, but he is keeping out on track. I think he's going to try and bring this one into the pit lane. You can see him limping through turn 11. Surely, oh my word, he is actually going to keep that one out. I don't think he really had much of the choice. We'll quickly cut on board with, oh my God, he puts a time on the chart with a damaged nose. Fair play there. As we see across the line goes Vincent Simard, one of the new drivers on the grid. So yeah, to touch on that note, like we mentioned back in round 1, we're dealing with quite an old school motor, the Jaguar AJ V8. That's been around since 1996. It's been the flagship V8 engine for Jaguar Land Rover. It's the same one you'll find in the Jaguar F-Type. It's the same one you'll find in the Jaguar XFR. You'll find that as well in the Range Rover SVR. And that AJ V8 has even been used in export models for the Land Rover Discovery 3. So it is quite a bizarre little motor, very versatile, and has definitely found its heart in quite a few different places over the course of the Jaguar Land Rover range. It's also found its way over to their rivals at Aston Martin. Jaguar licensed this engine out to Aston Martin to be license built as the AM05 engine for the 2006 to 2017 Aston Martin V8 Vantage. So it's quite a versatile little motor. Of course, the engine, I believe, looking back to my notes, has actually been co-prepped by Ilmore Engineering out of Brixworth, better known for their endeavours working in Formula 1 and IndyCar in the past. This was one of their more recent experiments with this Jaguar engine. And Skino weighing in, of course, some background knowledge. Skino's quite proficient with his Fords, and has weighed in with saying, which I inherently, I believe, is a Ford engine. I mean, yeah, it wouldn't actually be too far off. That engine would have come about 1996. That was when I believe Jaguar was owned, at least in part, by the Ford Motor Company. So I don't think it's actually too far off to suggest that this engine is a little bit more native to the area than we maybe give it the credit for. But at the end of free practice then, we still on board here with the newcomer on the block, making his debut in round 2 of the championship, Vincent Simard into the pits contempt with 7th place at the end of that free practice session. On towards qualifying then, 20 minutes against the clock and a flurry of V8s already as we see down towards that pit lane line, leading the charge among them though, the 824 of Byron Forrest. He swapped 6 cylinders for 8 coming into this season, and it was a muddled bag in that opening round. He had plenty of good fights, but also plenty of collisions, of which he decided both amongst himself and Kevin Quain to sort out by their lonesome. So it was great sportsmanship between the duo in the opening round of the championship. Heading into the next chapter here, as we're already halfway through our American chapter here in the opening season of the Jaguar GT3 Revival, in the hopes that it may return, saying that it's the opening season. We do find ourselves now a very reinvigorated performance since his time at Porsche. There were the inklings of championship competition in Forest last season in GT4s, and you can definitely see it come alive in the way that he's taken to the Jaguars over the course of not only Indianapolis, but in today's session as well. So, getting a look at those qualifying predictions coming into round 2 of the championship. It pitches Christian Lebay at the top of the timing charts once again. A 1:44.617 puts him about a little under here, 0.6 of a second from the nearest time. That being Kevin Quain in second, Carl Martel in third by about just under 0.2 of a second. So still very close stuff. And it's narrowing down here, as you can see it drop from tenths to hundredths, as now Vincent Simard finds himself only 400ths and 1,000th away from Carl Martel's third place time. Richard Cecil predicted at 5th, a 1:45.892, puts himself ahead of Daniel Poulin by a factor of just a little under 1/10 of a second between the pair of them. Alex Albert 7th place, Clinton Bourne predicted at 8th, Anthony Cote predicted at 9th, Byron Forrest though predicted at 10th. Could we be seeing a bit of a turnaround here in the predictions? Of course, that was taken at about 2:46 in the morning our time here at the recording studio. But this could be a drastically different performance to come out of Byron Forrest today, as we've already seen the beginnings of that, the kindlings of what could be this great fire in the 824 today. We've already seen a very fantastic free practice session. The question therein remains is, can he catch a lightning in a bottle again and go for that front row in qualifying today? Well, that's exactly what we're here to find out. He's already up through the S's and onto that back straight on the first of his flying laps here. Following in his wake, we'll see the 1:19 of Christian Lebay, the 6:07 of Kevin Quain, and the number 5 of Richard Cecil as our provisional first 4 times to get onto the charts. That's on the grounds. All of them can get valid times under their belts thick and fast here. 17.5 minutes left to go, so time is money. We're about to be bankrupt here in Watkins Glen. Down towards turn 6 we go then. Still on board with the leading car, Byron Forrest, to become our benchmark for round 2's qualifying endeavours today. Let's see if we can actually cut on board and see if the telemetry is going to give us anything to work with today. Now, it is a bit of a stab in the dark to see if we'll get anything at all. And sadly, seems to be the case where we're still considering that outlap as part of his grand qualifying performance. So ACC giving us a little bit of a kick on the backside there for the hopes that we may be able to actively track some data today. Down towards turn 8 we go then. Still on board with Byron Forrest. Down towards turn 11 he goes, so it's been quite fleet of foot for the start here by Byron Forrest. Let's see where that puts him on the charts as he's down towards the line then. Byron Forrest across the line, 1:45.597. Right from behind him though comes Christian Lebay, 1:44.922. Next onto the charts comes the 6:07 of Kevin Quain, and doesn't seem to set a time in, so then it's up to Richard Cecil, and the number 5 puts himself 3rd fastest. From behind him the number 6 of Clinton Bourne, 4th fastest. The 1:20, that's Vincent Simard to the line, and 5th fastest for the newcomer. Next to the line then, the number 99 of Carl Martel, currently making his way out of turn 9, down towards turn 10. Following in his trails, the number 707 of Stephen Black, and the number 58 of Timo de Tosto, not too far away from them either. The number 44 of Dan Jr., that's Daniel Poulin. And the 44 Jaguar at the back of that 4-car pack. Then, just hanging around 2 corners behind there, the 962 of Carl David Bourdreau. Carl Martel across the line then puts himself up and ahead of Bourne and Simard, up to 4th fastest. Then next to the line comes the 707 of Black. Right behind him then is Timo de Tosto, and they immediately swap hands there for control of 7th place. From behind them we see emerging to the line, that was the number 44. Daniel Poulin has to go round the track one more time before he can put a time on the charts today. The number 962 Carl David Bourdreau next to the line in that fantastic bronze orange 962 Jaguar. He's 8th fastest and ahead of the 707 of Stephen Black. Next to the line then is the same drivers who started today's session. We're back on board with Byron Forrest in the 824. The number 119, I should say, is right behind him, that being Christian Lebay. then the 607, then the 5, then the 6, then the 120. We get to do it all over again, but following in their wake, we can see tucked back behind the field there, that is the bright pink and green of Alex Albert's Jaguar, just behind Vincent Simard. So a catch back on board here with Byron Forrest to the line. Will it be an improvement for the 824 as he crosses the line? Yes, it is by 3 tenths, but what would it be for LeBay? Almost immediately nullified. 2 tenths of an improvement brings all of that to a screeching halt. The 607 next to the line, finally onto the charts for Kevin Quain, and he's 5th fastest. Number 6 of Clinton Bourne next to the line. Does he get up and ahead of Quain back into the top 5? Doesn't seem to be the case. What's the case for Richard Simard? Needed 3 attempts to get up and ahead of Bourne, but leaps by a country mile up to 4th place and ahead of Martel and Quain. Pushes Quain out of the top 5. The 99 next to the line. Here comes Carl Martel. Can he stage an offensive here for 4th place? And Skino in chat saying, odd car for a spec series, but I like it something different. Yeah, it was definitely quite a bizarre prompt to have hit my desk from the folks over at Competizione Performance League, but it has proven itself as quite a novel little idea. As we see here, Carl Martel now up and ahead of Vincent Simard, up to 4th, and very, very close to one another as well. Should do Jaguar XK GT3 versus BMW M6 GT3. I like the sound of that idea. I think that the Competizione Performance League could go a long way tapping into these niches here. I think definitely one was what was considered for the time was the V12 Vantage Cup. I know that Skino, you yourself actually competed back in the, and this is a long time ago, the Aston Martin V8 Vantage Cup in TRR, and that was the staging point between Season 3 and 4, the Sprint Series. So it is nice to see that even after all these years, the idea of doing a single make for just one specific GT3 car is an idea that people will still flock to. And this series so far, we saw back in Indianapolis, it was a hell of an opening round. And right now, qualifying is still very, very close indeed. We actually find Byron Forrest and Richard Cecil currently divided by about 600ths of a second. But we see Byron Forrest claw that time all the way back. LeBay, though, opening the taps up to make the chance of getting pole position even harder for either Forrest or Cecil. So next stepping up to the line appears to be Kevin Quain, who goes up by, looking at it here, 75 thousandths of a second ahead of Byron Forrest. We said it was going to be close between the pair of them by the looks at the end of free practice, and it seems to be no different here. 12.5 minutes left to go in qualifying, barely scratching towards the halfway mark, and we are already absolutely chock-a-block for close times here on these charts. Looking further down the line, Richard Cecil's been pushed out of commission from the podium, finds himself on the back of that second row, but not by a long way. He still has a great chance, just like Byron Forrest, to come and have a go back up for that second row. If he can get past Forrest, there's very little in the way of saying he can't get past Quain. Looking further down the line, Carl Martel down across the line remains in 5th. Vincent Simard, though, has a very good chance here as he only finds himself about 900ths, actually 87 thousandths of a second to be more precise, away from Carl Martel's time. So a top 5 start for the 120 is not off the table at this time. Further down the line, Clinton Bourne finds himself meandering towards the back of the top 10 right now. Less than ideal for the number 6, but he'll still find himself just a little bit clear of the chaos, set to kick off towards the back of that pack. Timo de Tosto in the 58 finds himself in 8th place ahead of Alex Albert and Daniel Poulin. Then just outside of it, Carl David Boudreau and Stephen Black. Andrew Veldkamp, the only other driver yet to set times, as of course, as per the regulation rulings after round 1 of the championship. And just to refresh your memory on this, the number 18 car, Julio Bahena, is set to receive a qualifying ban after exceeding the penalty threshold. That was 5 penalty points for various incidents at Indianapolis at round 1 of the championship. So he'll be missing out on today's session and will be starting down in 14th place. Next towards the line, we'll catch on board here with Clinton Bourne. Had a little bit of bother there out of turn 10. As he makes his way around turn 11, you can see that is the wall everyone is quite terrified of right now. And you saw how close Bourne was able to get to it there before a collision. Behind him, you can see heading towards the line is Alex Albert. Just towards the back of that top 10 at the moment. Needs about 2 tenths of a second on De Tosto to get up into 8th place. And he does make a 10th there. It is exactly a 10th now between De Tosto and Albert for control of 8th place. So still very, very close stuff in the bag here. Kevin Quain still up the road by 75 thousandths of a second over Byron Forrest. Richard Cecil could be closing the taps in soon. He finds himself still in en passant after that last lap gone. Out through turn 5 he goes in the number 5. Next towards the line was the 44. Daniel Poulin remains in 10th place. Then the 707 of Stephen Black makes his way to the line. And seems to be the same story there, plateauing for results. I just want to point this out. It's just a little under 0.2 of a second between 3 cars there towards the back of that top 10. That's about 2.005 off of the fastest and 2.198. That brings you to about 193 thousandths of a second between 3 positions on track. That is dangerously close to the average human reaction time, so it is very, very close stuff towards the back of the top 10 here in qualifying. Looking further up the line, though, there is still that very large elephant in the room. That is the gap right now between Forest and Quain. And with 9 minutes left to go, still plenty of time for it. What is the strategy here for Byron Forest? We are likely to see yet another time extension on Christian Lebey's fastest, 144.527, to bring back up what the qualifying predictions had to say about it. He's capable of a 144. Actually, this is beyond. I had to just check my glasses there, but no, he is operating well beyond his means now. He was predicted at a 44.617. He finds himself with a 44.527. So this is well beyond what even Simbot could have predicted at the time. It does bring back some fond memories of, I think it was the story back in Formula 1 of Lewis Hamilton out qualifying the predicted perfect time in Singapore. That does really strike true there with the performance of that 119. Kevin Quain still out on track, still with a point to prove here as he's up the road from Byron Forest on times, physically up the road there from Carl Martel as he makes his way down towards turn 8. But is 0.6 of a second a gap too far? Is it a bridge too far for Kevin Quain to make over Christian Lebey? Looking back to what the qualifying predictions had to say about things, it put those two at their closest on those predictions there by about 0.4 of a second. Actually, looking at it here, I believe, doing the precise maths, it's about 0.4 and 700ths, I should say. So just a little under half a second. Now, this is the furthest out we've seen it for these two in quite some time. Quain down towards the line, and he does bring that a lot closer to reality there. 530 thousandths over the course of that last lap now is the gap between himself and the leading time. Moreover, it presses quite a large gap compared to where it was just before between himself and Forest down in 3rd place. See here, down towards the line comes Richard Cecil. So this is the next possible threat to Byron Forest's 3rd place. As he crosses the line, no improvement. Do we yet see one from Vincent Simard across the line? Bear in mind, his gap is not too far at all here. A little under 0.09 of a second between himself and Carl Martel at the back of that top 5. 36 next towards the line. Here comes Alex Albert from 9th place on the field. Needed exactly a 10th on Ditosto. Couldn't find it. And what does Ditosto find? He finds 0.3 of a second. Now getting ever closer to Clinton Bourne in 7th place. The 962 from behind them there. That's Carl David Bourdreau across the line. Didn't find an improvement. Appeared to be, at least according to telemetry there, invalidated over that last lap just gone. Andrew Veldkamp on his way out of turn 11, following in his wake is Daniel Poulin and the number, looking at it there, the number 6 of Clinton Bourne. Veldkamp across the line, sadly to no improvement on position. Next we cut on board with it as just a little bit of trouble over the 90 at turn 1. We cut on board now out through turn 11. This is for the 707 of Stephen Black. Making his way down towards the line. 6 minutes left to go. We do have that update that Byron Forest is now back out on track, looking to go toe-to-toe with a front row start on the table. 6 minutes then left to go. After that last lap, Stephen Black finds himself once again in 13th place. Kevin Quain across the line. Sadly, to this time, no improvement, unlike last time around where he found just a little more time over Byron Forest and a little time closer toward Christian Lebey. We do find Byron Forest here making his way round turn 5. We'll catch on board with him towards the end of this lap as he starts what I can assume here is his flying lap in the next couple of minutes' time. Richard Cecil down towards the line with 823 thousandths of a second to contend with. Can't find even a smidgen on that as he makes his way down towards turn 1. It seems here that I think we discussed this at length back in round 1. Track complexity can play a huge role in how one's qualifying goes. We see for Alex Albert, that is an improvement there. Now puts himself within 0.2 of a second over Timo Tosto, of which the 58 cannot extend by any margin there. The 962 across the line. Here comes Carl David Bourdreau. Will we see an improvement into the top 10? Needed 0.7 of a second as one of the largest gaps near and around that top 10 for any one single position. 5 minutes left to go. And now we catch back on board with the 824 of Byron Forrest, making his way down through turns 9 and 10. As we begin that discussion once again, and I picked up on this back in Indianapolis, and it was how track complexity is going to have a pronounced effect on qualifying endeavours today. We have seen that things have been a little bit more persuasive, I would say, in the long run over Indianapolis, and that's just simply down to the fact that it's only 11 corners, but that does come inherently with its own set of challenges. Yes, there are fewer corners, but that means more corners that you have to nail. I imagine over the course of a qualifying lap at the Nordschleife, things are going to be a little less intense for that margin for error. I'm sure that you could mess up a few sections and still be within a chance of a front row, but with only 11 corners up for scratch, it really is a case of quality over quantity. Where this isn't with the 15 corners we were dealing with back in Indianapolis, all of varying shapes and sizes. Watkins Glen is a pretty cut and dry, fast-paced track here, owing to its history in stock car and endurance racing. It is really designed to exhilarate the senses, and out through turn 5, down towards turn 6, you can see what I mean here as he drops down towards chute corner, keeping quite a tremendous bit of speed. Gap still resides then between himself and Kevin Quain, now having been recently extended up to 160 thousandths of a second. That's 1/10 and 600ths. With 3.5 minutes left to go, there is still the chances here with functionally looking at it here, two, perhaps even at a squeeze, 3 more laps left for Byron Forrest. So the chances right now, as it now ticks down towards 3 minutes, are wearing remarkably thin. So definitely 2 laps, I would say, still available for Byron Forrest at this time. We'll have a gander later on to see whether or not he can hit that coveted 3-lap mark, though the chances, I would say, are very, very low at this time. Actually impossible now as we get to that 3-minute mark. So down through turn 11, the final 2 laps coming up here for Byron Forrest. He's had an incredible pre-practice session. Right now finds himself 160 thousandths off of Kevin Quain. Across the line, it was an improvement. You can see he now toes the line to 13 thousandths of a second. So if that is not already quite the heavy precedent set in stone from the 824, sent forward to that front row, I don't know what is. Next towards the line then, we'll cut away from Forrest as we catch on board with the newest driver to join the field, the number 120 of Vincent Simard. Down towards the line he goes. Currently still needs just a little in that range of 900ths of a second on Karl Martel, and that gap has remained well fortified at the back of the top 5 for Martel. It's been an iron wall defense, seemingly, for the 99 to hold on to where he is on the grid right now. This is all bear in mind for only 2 positions that comprise the 3rd row of this currently 7-car row grid. 2 minutes left to go then. Time is wearing quite thin, and we see, remarkably, out of our front row here, Christian Labate and Kevin Quain remain dormant in the pit lane, content with what they have done so far. And now, you can definitely imagine for Kevin Quain a little bit of intensity now, and definitely quite a bit of suspense as we now see in that middle and final, into the final sector now, having just crossed out of turn 7 in towards turn 8, is Byron Forrest, having brought that gap down quite away from 160 thousandths to 13 thousandths. The chances remain equally open here for that 13 thousandths to be crushed to 0 and Forrest to have that 2nd place by the end of qualifying today. Bear in mind, he's got 1 more flying lap after this one he's doing right now. So 1 last dash here. If he can't make it now, he's got 1 more in the pocket before the end of qualifying today. So down towards the line. Could it be up to 2nd this time for Byron Forrest in the number 824 across the line? Yes, it is. And by 7 thousandths at the end of qualifying here. But he's still got 1 more in the tank. So point proven. But let's see by how far as the 824 exits turn 1. The number 120 is next down towards the line. We'll catch on board with Byron Forrest as and when we get any progress updates from the 824, currently exiting turn 4. This, though, is the number 120 of Vincent Simard out of turn 11 and narrowly escaping contact with the inside pit wall after a little bit of upset on the exit of turn 11. Nonetheless, he still has 1 more lap. Not that he'll be taking it. Simard content with 6th. 2 drivers remain on this field then. Clinton Bourne, who is racing against time to get down towards that line, but with 20 seconds left to go, his chances for 1 more flying lap on what appears to be an invalid one for him at the moment remain paper thin. So really, it does point in the direction of Byron Forrest, but as I've just gotten updates there, out of turn 6, invalidated and coming to a stop, Byron Forrest content with more than enough well and above and beyond the call of duty here at the end of qualifying, puts himself 7 thousandths up the road from Kevin Quain onto the front row, and will be side by side with Christian Lebay, who led this session by over half a second all the way to the very end. We will catch on board though with Clinton Bourne, because it does appear that he is still on what could be a valid flying lap. We'll see down towards the line. Can he get up and ahead of 6th place at the end of quali? Sadly, not this time around, but so I believe that was an improvement over his personal fastest. So, great signs for things to come here for the number 6 at the end of qualifying. Moreover, Christian Lebay on pole position, and quite the compelling story to decide that last of the 2 positions on the front row. We'll get on to the rundown of that grid in just a moment's time. Whilst we've got the opportunity, let's recount some articles of news in the world of motorsports today. Starting us off, a very compelling story coming out of the world of Mercedes-AMG as they finished testing here for what they call the Concept AMG GT Track Sport. It's set to be a track-focused variation of the C192 Mercedes-AMG GT facelift, and right now it's believed to be a homologation car for a mainline GT3 update to the existing AMG GT, being developed in parallel with a potential track-faring counterpart. This right now is set to follow on the same design ethos as cars like the Porsche 911 GT3 RS and the Ford Mustang GTD. They say it's being developed in parallel, much akin to how we've seen with Toyota with their latest GR GT3 concept and its subsequent road car, of which has swapped alleged names several times between Toyota's GT and Lexus's LFR. Into the next article of news before we get onto the grid today, and it's in the world of Formula 1. Lando Norris wins the Mexican Grand Prix, much to the chagrin of his teammate Oscar Piastri and much to the chagrin of defending world champion Max Verstappen, as he now goes on to lead the championship a single point ahead of Piastri. Still incredibly close though, with only a few more rounds left to go. That championship is still far from over. A very compelling story set to follow in the world of Formula 1. But onto the discussion of round 2's grid here in the Competizione Performance League GT3 Revival Series, the Jaguar GT3 Revival Series, as I should say, powered by Jaguar Transport and Assure Action Transport Expert. We find ourselves with once again another GT3 pole position here for Christian Lebay, the 119 Jaguar up front leading this field. But really, quite the compelling story out of qualifying today has been that of Byron Forrest on the front row alongside Lebay and 7 thousandths up the road ahead of Kevin Quain, I should say, who rounds out that podium position. He starts on that second row ahead of Richard Cecil. Carl Martel at the back of the top 5 makes the third row alongside Vincent Simard. Still very close stuff between those two as well, a little under 900ths of a second at the end of qualifying today. In 7th and 8th place, Clinton Bourne and Timo de Tosto still very closely decided as well. 3 different stories for the price of 1 qualifying session. And towards the back of the top 10, then the 5th row, 9th place for Alex Albert and 10th place for Daniel Poulin. In 11th place, Carl David Bourdreau and Andrew Veldkamp in 12th place to round out that 6th row. And on the 7th row, Stephen Black in 13th and Julio Bahena starting from the back in 14th after his qualifying ban for round 2 of the championship. About a minute left to go then. Things are going to be quite exciting today. Looking at where our principal overtaking spots could be here on this track at Watkins Glen International, look no further than turn 1 down at the 90, but then you'll have to look quite far up the road for the run down the back straight and in towards the inner loop chicane. Now in GT3, we've seen it to be quite likely that drivers will get elbows out owing to that drastic difference in straight line speed observed up in GT3, but this is going to be more on a setup level here, so much more nuanced differences in straight line speed as we've seen from this grid already over the course of Indianapolis. It's much harder to stay in one another's slipstream and get an overarching advantage. It is very close, almost akin to, and this was something I was saying when I was in conversations with a few of the folks now racing today in a call earlier on, and it's really, when you look at the fundamentals for this Jaguar, aerodynamics not huge on this vehicle. This is not the best aero we've seen on a GT3 car by a long shot, and really it's Emil Frey Racing working with the resources at hand. Big 5-litre V8 engine, naturally aspirated, big, chunky, almost muscular style car. This is the closest thing Jaguar has produced in a good while here to a stock car, so it should be, in theory, right at home. I know it's a bit of a broadside claim, because it is, of course, a GT3, and if you look really beneath the surface, there are going to be plenty more differences between it and a stock car. But to its finest and most reductive level, 5-litre V8, less than ideal aerodynamics, and a bit of a chunky car to boot. It's the closest thing we're getting, besides the Camaro in ACC, to a stock car. So I'd say right now, it's right at home here at Watkins Glen. A bit of a compelling article of news, though, recently coming from the grid as we see that Vincent Simard, the 120, on his opening race here in the Competizione Performance League, appears to be starting from the pit lane. Now, I don't necessarily think there's any strategy to be called behind that decision for Simard. I believe this to be accidental for the newcomer on the field. Of course, we'll have to hear from him later on as to exactly what was the method behind the madness, if any at all. Right now, he starts from the pit lane. We'll be avoiding a lot of that action down towards turn 1. Of course, that mandatory pit stop is, of course, a principal part of these 60-minute races today. Of course, every driver will have to serve on. It's for fuel and tyres alike. So a lot of strategy to be involved in the next 60 minutes following. Leading that charge, steely control and determination from the word go in this season so far for Christian Lebay. It doesn't look unlikely that he'll go on to take home another race win, but giving him a very good challenge to boot will hopefully be that sort of, I want to say almost Aston Martin podium racing green, the 824 of Byron Forrest, but let's be honest with ourselves, it's more realistically blue. Julio Bahena then will revel in a free position change. He'll be starting from 13th in today's race after that pit lane start for the number 120. Looking for Carl David Bourdreau here, we can see that he does find himself in a very peculiar spot. He'll actually be up in the top 10 by the looks of things because of that pit lane start. So he does find himself now on much better point stead to be fighting side by side with Daniel Poulon. He'll also be seeing great benefit here as he was struggling to keep his position inside of the top 10 for quite some time. He was actually just outside of it for the start of today's race. So to be able to start back in the top 10, I imagine is a great endeavour for him. Actually, no, looking at it here, because they've yet to have updated, if I'm not mistaken. So, no, he was always in the top 10, but this will now be 9th place. So you can't argue with an upgrade. You cannot argue with an upgrade. Down towards turn 7, just on the exit of turn 7, I should say, onto the boot straight towards turn 8 here at Watkins Glen. We catch back on board with our leading 3, and that is a menacing sight here, seeing these Jaguars slowly crawl over the hills here in Watkins Glen International. Now, of course, we mentioned overtaking spots earlier, and we were mentioning more principally the first corner and the inner loop chicane, but it would be naive to not consider as well turn 6, turn 7, turn 8, and of course here turns 9 and 10. Turn 11, we've not seen so many side-by-side moves, as many as we've seen the start of side-by-side moves down that opening straight, so do keep a close eye on pretty much every portion of the track here. I mean, the only areas where I've not seen compelling enough argument to say they're overtaking spots has been up through the S's. It's just been actually on quite a few occasions way too dangerous to even attempt it, especially with wet weather. Of course, our drivers won't be seeing that today. Without further ado, so begins the procession here. 14 cars in all, 6 one side of it, 7 on the other, 1 from the pit lane, much to the chagrin of Vincent Simard for round 2 of the Competizione Performance League Jaguar GT3 Revival Series here in Watkins Glen International. We are green and racing, 60 minutes against the clock, and a great getaway by the 119. Immediate defense there by Byron Forrest as he squeaks his way up to the right-hand side of the track to keep the inside, down through the 90 to cover off an immediate advance by the 607 of Kevin Quain. Good defense there from the American in the 824, but leading the charge is the 119 out through turns 1, 2, 3, and 4. Further down the line, we can see being released from the pit lane there was Vincent Simard. Looking down the line, Julio Bahena already into the thick of it there, side by side with Timo de Tosta, who is in turn now side by side with Alex Albert, who is in turn almost side by side with Carl David Bourdreau. Looking over the rear view of Julio Bahena gives us a very clear view of what is steel on all quarters down towards the inner loop chicane. Getting the best out of it, though, appears to be Alex Albert up towards 9th place as he makes his way to turn 5. You see Carl David Bourdreau squeezed right up to the back end of Timo de Tosto on the exit of turn 5. Down towards turn 6 we go. The number 962 there in the bronze car, chasing the white 58 of de Tosto. Out through turn 6, he has a great opportunity with a little bit of a wiggle there from the 58, leaves him vulnerable, but he holds the inside of the track. But with more momentum, this could be a prime overtaking opportunity coming up very, very shortly for Carl David Bourdreau as de Tosto is flagging. We'll have to catch up with those two a little later on. We see further up the order, Daniel Poulon up to 6th place. Richard Cecil in the top 5. You can see not too far up the road at all. Carl Markle, Kevin Quain Byron Forrest and Christian LeBay up into that top 4. Off to I'd say by all accounts, a pretty squeaky clean start here. I was expecting a little bit of the bedlam of round 1 to follow suit, but seemingly here, when you give them the wide quarters of a stock car racing track like Watkins Glen, you are actually blessed with quite a solid start by all accounts. Normally it can get a little bit elbows out early doors, a little bit too eager, but really, we've seen some textbook driving so far. Let's hope that we don't get an upset to that, as we see a little bit of argy-bargy there between Bahena and Bourne. Now forces him down into the iron sights of what appears to be, yes, that is Alex Albert in the 36. That bright magenta and green Jaguar now nearly alongside, but trimmed a lot of momentum coming up through the S's. So down the back straight actually leaves him increasingly vulnerable to Timo de Tosto. Now, I was expecting Bourdreau to be able to stay with de Tosto, but de Tosto has really just took the baton and ran with it. He has vanished up the road into that top 10. Looking further around the field here, we see Andrew Veldkamp currently down in 12th place. Next in his iron sights appears to be that of Carl David Bourdreau's 962. Looking further up the order, though, we can see things are still incredibly close and look to be getting even closer in a moment's time between Kevin Quain and Byron Forrest in that clash for 2nd place. Now, this is a little bit of a step up from their middle of the top 10 fights we were seeing the majority of over the course of Indianapolis. This time, without the Europeans in contention, such as Badiali and Proger, it's left the podium bare for the presence here of Byron Forrest and Kevin Quain. Not that they'll be arguing with the opportunity at all. You snooze, and subsequently you lose. Out through turn 9 and in towards turn 10. This is looking to be a grand fight here on the podium, but let's not take away from what is going on right behind them there. You can see that yellow and orange, that being Carl Martel and Richard Cecil, the 99 and the number 5, still clashing for what is 4th place by about 4 tenths either side of it. Down through turn 11 we go. On board here with Kevin Quain, you can see having shook him loose out through the final sector there. Appears to be that of Byron Forrest. We can see now up the road by 180 thousandths of a second in that last lap just gone. Now looking further behind them to what could be the closer of 2 fights. We're on board with Richard Cecil in that fight for 4th place on the field. This could be quite an exciting one up through the S's here. You can see following religiously in the slipstream generated by Carl Martel's number 99. Further down the line, we can also see a very close fight. It's between Daniel Poulon and Julio Bahena. So we'll cut away here just quickly just to see what does go on between these two. Down towards the inner loop chicane. Bahena right alongside with Daniel Poulon, but a little bit of a snip to the inside of the inner loop chicane has cut a lot of the wind from his sails, and moreover it's pushed him back into Clinton Bourne's iron sights. But you can see the Australian run wide through turn 5, pushes himself back into the iron sights of Alex Albert. So there's a lot of ebb and flow to be discussed over the course of this grid. You can see another wide incident, this time out through chute corner at turn 6 for Clinton Bourne. That leaves Alex Albert the opportunity to run him around the outside towards turn 7. That nearly invites in, as a matter of fact, Timo de Tosto in the 58 car as well. Looking up the order, though, with Bahena and Poulon, this is getting very, very spicy indeed. Much closer than the 2 fights we've seen before, but they are quite a distance away from the top 5 now. They find themselves in their own little world fighting for 6th place. And I must say, it's great hustle for Julio Bahena. He did find himself public enemy number 1 in Indianapolis, but he has really gotten a wriggle on. Started in 14th, has already cut half the grid down in his opening 6 minutes of driving here in I almost said in Indianapolis, in Watkins Glen International. I must say, that is a real turnaround. I would definitely say right now you're gunning for a driver of the day pick by all accounts. With a drive like that, take notes. Looking further up the road from Bahena, we now see the defending point of view in that fight for 6th place. It's Daniel Poulon, who I must say has also had a pretty solid fight by all accounts, but this might be coming to a very swift closure because he's left himself very vulnerable out of the 90 as we head up the S's. Now will be to the inside, but closing back in. It's contact, so it seems there, up through the S's, and it has erupted into bedlam down the S's. My word, get a look at that. Multiple cars collected in the fray of it. You can see even further down the line, looks to be even more complications on the line here for what appears to be Bahena, Bourdreau and Albert. You can see where it started. That was up through turn 3, and there it just spills over. That was actually up on all 4 wheels, gone up in the air for Julio Bahena. That has not gone well. All of those drivers now with quite significant damage shoved down a peg. This is great news for Andrew Veldkamp and Vincent Simard and Stephen Black, they find themselves even closer to the action than they've ever been before. So down towards turn 7 we go. This is the aftermath of that collision. We now find Julio Bahena at the back of the top 10. So maybe did we speak too soon, or is that just a bit of commentator's curse creeping its way into the Jaguar GT3 Revival Series? Only time will tell. But seemingly having emerged almost unscathed by the whole incident is Daniel Poulin in the 44, remains in 6th place. This is a remarkable little story here to discuss for Poulin, because we saw the incident. We saw him near enough self-right the car there, but how on earth has he come out of that with what seems to be little to no visible damage? You know, I'm sure he'll be a little bit shook up about it, but that's about the extent of the damage we are seeing. Very bizarre stuff indeed. So you see here, further down the line, this is Vincent Simard looking to get toe-to-toe here with Andrew Veldkamp's number 616 car. You can see up the road as well. Looks to be some side-by-side action. Let's see if we can get on board here with Albert V. De Tosto. De Tosto up to 9th. Albert with significant damages here is left sitting in the sun in that 36. Very little he could have done to try and defend, given the state of his front aero. Up through the S's, you can see the aero wash is so drastic here on the 36. He's already got very little aerodynamics to work with. My word, that's Bahena again into the wall. What on earth happened? That is absolutely bizarre. I mean, if I had the amount of times now that there's been an incident up this hill, I'd have two. I mean, if I had a pound, I'd have £2, which is concerning, because how the hell did it happen twice? Twice, in a matter of fact, under 3 minutes. What on earth happened there? It looked like... I mean, call me insane, but that looked like the car almost got shoved by some invisible force. It didn't look as clear-cut as a spin-out. It was quite sudden. It was jerky almost out through the turn 3 and 4 section of the track. We also saw an incident up the road. This for Veldkamp and Black, so it seems. They find themselves down in 11th and 12th. They dropped quite a bit of time out of turn 6. It is madness outside of the top 10 here. See now back into the warm confines of the top 10, as I hope to not see anywhere near the level of madness we've observed outside of it recently, is the number 962 here, Carl David Bourdreau, fighting with Timo De Tosto. We see that De Tosto has been on quite the warpath. We now look just briefly into the top 5 as we see things have simmered down. Hell has seemingly frozen over on the podium fight for now. Right now I want to try and catch on board with that number 58. We quickly see here Bahena now down in 14th. But it's all come apart at the seams. Andrew Veldkamp having a spot of bother out through turn 10. The number 18 getting around him at turn 11, but you can see significant rear wing damage. That's left the car increasingly unstable. Both the 18 and the 616 are into the pit lanes. I want to try and catch on board here, and I think we skipped in the first time. Here we go with the 58 of Timo De Tosto up through the S as we go. Right now on board in what is that fight for 8th place. He has really been, for all intents and purposes, in this opening 10 minutes here on the warpath. We saw him carve his way through the field so far, seemingly taking up some of that same fighting spirit we saw out of Julio Bahena before his big incident up through the S's with Daniel Poulin's 44. Staying on board here with De Tosto as we recount where things are standing after 10 minutes in this race, with LeBay leading now by the last recorded interval at 2.2 seconds up the road from Byron Forrest. Kevin Quain in 3rd, but looking increasingly vulnerable to losing the podium to Carl Martel in the 99. Not too far away from him at all at the back of that top 5 is Richard Cecil. Daniel Poulin in 6th place with Clinton Bourne in 7th. We're watching here with Carl David Bourdreau in the 962 car. We're on board with the man fighting him for 8th position. Down in 9th himself is Timo De Tosto in the 58. Then outside, at the back of that top 10, I should say, is Alex Albert. Outside of the top 10 is where we've seen the danger zone. That's been for Stephen Black, who's actually recently found a little bit more benefit to it as he's up to 11th place. Vincent Simard starting from the pit lanes now up to 12th. Julio Bahena and Andrew Veldkamp into the pit lane. 13th and 14th. Big step there for Carl David Bourdreau. That could be the opportunity that Timo De Tosto has been searching for in the last 10 minutes, making his way down towards the turn 1 at the 90, I should say. He's got a much better run out of turn 11, and I did say it would take quite a good send from the final corner to put himself side by side, as principally with everyone on the same engine here, it's very, very hard to extract significant chunks of better, straight line speed. Is all down to that setup and ultimately on a track that, despite only having 11 corners, are 11 pretty decently high commitment corners, you can't really afford the same rights to run an ultra low downforce setup as you would at, say, the Autodromo Nazionale di Monza. Oh, big step out there, as we see catching a little bit of the grass was Carl David Bourdreau. Let's get a look at that on the replays here. We were watching with Timo de Tosto still on board at the moment with the 58. Making his way down through turn 5. You can see there, just ducks his way onto the left-hand side. That tiny blade of grass is what caught the rear left tyre as he got onto the brakes, made the back end swing even further onto the grass, and that was just a cascade effect. Let's just watch that for a second time here before we cut back on board. We can still see in the bottom right there, watching with the 58, and there you can see it's just... From the word go, once he was sideways like that, he was a passenger in his own car. For Timo de Tosto, it's brought a swift closure to that fight for 8th place. Not that he'll be arguing with where he's standing right now after nearly 15 minutes of racing, but that was really quite the near wipeout for the 962. Fortunately, so it seems, if we go and catch on board with Carl David Bourdreau, he has emerged, relatively speaking, unscathed, bar for what could be a little bit of flat spotting on those Pirellis. Looking further around the field, though, we do find ourselves with at least a few battles to discuss. And let's start off here in that top 5. We did see Karl Martel was very close at one point to Kevin Quaid, but now we find the gap even closer between himself and Richard Cecil. Let's see if we can catch on board here with the attacker's point of view. On board with Richard Cecil in what is currently that fight for 4th place. Up through turn 4 and on to the back straight we go. Now, we've seen drivers get already quite ambitious with how much of the track they want to use. You can see, though, up in that top 5, they're not taking any of those risks at all. Out through turn 5 we go, then. You can see that Richard Cecil is clawing in quite a bit of time in the opening sector over Karl Martel. The gap currently 0.4 of a second. They're down through turn 6 as they begin the run through the middle sector in towards the, what is the international, otherwise known as the boot section of the track. Down towards turn 7 we go. And hear that juddering of the throttle there on that 5 litre. He's just letting some of the TC do its work there, keep the car from over rotating. The car is fighting him just a little bit on the exit of the corners here. It's all just to keep that 5 litre tamed. Down towards turn 9 we go. And see, he likes to hold himself a little bit short of the apex for the run in, but on the run out, tucks in harder than Martel. You can see where that's rewarding the drivers for their efforts. Martel's got a lot more of an aggressive run in, a little bit more of a conservative run out. You can see this may not actually be a directly involved decision for Richard Cecil, as we saw quite a hefty bit of aero wash through turn 11. So whether or not he's consciously making the choice to go a little bit later into the apexes may actually be a case of the car just not finding the grip until much later in the corner. We'll catch on with these two in a moment's time. We take a look around the field for where our nearest fights are coming from. These are for 2 separate positions on track, though, with Andrew Velkamp 13th. Stephen Black on your screens at the moment in the 707 is in fact not under any risk of losing his position right now. The 707 is more than comfortable in where he stands in 11th. You can see here Christian Lebay leading by 2.8 seconds, so slowly building his walls higher and higher and higher here in round 2 of the championship. Byron Forrest, though, has left the competition in the dust, where we would have thought that Kevin Quain would have been able to stay a lot closer, considering these two's capacity for close fighting. As we saw back in Indianapolis, it has been a broadly different affair between the 824 and the 607. That gap now up at 2.1 seconds, just drops into 2 seconds as we make our way in towards turn 7. Things definitely having dissipated just a tad quicker than they have back in Indianapolis. That's definitely come at quite the cost for lively battles at this time. You can see definitely the strategy starting to play a little bit of a hand this early on in the race. Now, we could expect the bulk of our pit stops in and around, I'd say anywhere between the next 6 minutes and the next 16 minutes. We could see another 60-40 strategy out of a few drivers today, but I am expecting here closer to a 50-50. Of course, our predictions in terms of when drivers are coming into the pits are never really that accurate, because at the end of the day, you just can't get inside of their heads. Big step there for Richard Cecil, having lost a lot of time out through turn 11. Finds himself on that last lap 0.2 slower, actually a little under 0.2 slower, about 180 thousandths of a second slower on that last lap just gone in the number 5. The man in the middle, as it were, Karl Martel, finds himself in a very precarious spot on the field as he finds himself so close yet so far away on all fronts of a fight here. Kevin Quain up on the podium in front of him. Richard Cecil from the back of the top 5 behind him. Finds himself a little bit lost in it all here, stuck in rhythm in the 99. We'll stay on board here for just a moment's time with Karl Martel making his way out of turn 5. You can see he is chasing up towards the back end of Kevin Quain. Bear in mind, still chasing him is Richard Cecil. So this is a little bit of a swings and roundabouts kind of game here for the 99. He is being pressured by Cecil behind. And is that perhaps playing into his hands here? Because we have seen that Martel is usually performing his best when being directly pursued. It's when we've seen him at his most consistent, was where we've seen him at probably his most logical on track. When he's given the sort of free reins of it, we do see the times start to decay almost, but riding in the wake of another driver, getting ready to hunt them down for position, it seems that he's almost extrinsically motivated by the opportunity for a position, and that's what drives him towards those faster times, is that competition of being around others in the first place. We see it in the way that Karl Martel has always been in and around that middle bracket for qualifying, but then come race day, he's an animal, a completely different animal on track. Out through turn 11, you can see exactly what I'm talking about here, because he's just able to glue himself onto the line there and finds 4/10 of a second. I had to double check that, 4/10 on one lap. So up through turns 2, 3, and 4, up the S as we go. We're going to stay on board more than definitely this time around with Karl Martel. We were planning to cut away and see what the rest of the grid was concerned with, but right now I think we are in amongst its closest fights for position. This is Karl Martel versus Kevin Quain up in front, and right now it's for the last of those podium positions. They're out through the inner loop chicane and down towards the outer loop at turn 5. Nearly 20 minutes into this race and things are starting to heat back up here in Schuyler County, New York State. In terms of what's coming up in the future for 2026 with the Competizione Performance League, of course, is the return of the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series for Season 2. So Christian Lebay will be returning to defend his title by the looks of things in the 119 Chevrolet. Right now is looking to go tit for tat for championships here in Competizione Performance League, already having led the charge out of round 1. Looks to continue to lead the charge 20 minutes strong into round 2. We're watching here with Karl Martel versus Kevin Quain for 3rd place, on board with the 99, the attacking of 2. As Kevin Quain has put up a very good fight here over the course of lap 10. Back into that touch on what is coming up in the future for Competizione Performance League. Now, I don't want to speak too early on the project or necessarily the specifics of it, but know that there are some curious projects in the inner workings at Competizione Performance League that we can't quite talk about just yet, but we will likely so be involved with here on TRTN. And it is looking to be very exciting coming up into the next couple of months. In fact, into the next year, as a matter of fact. It is going to be quite an interesting time. And I think that also comes with the fact that we are approaching quite an interesting schism point in the world of console sim racing. And this is a topic I've been wanting to brush up on. And I will be continuing that conversation furthermore into this week's coming broadcast, the 6 hours of Nürburgring over on the No Limits Racing League's console endurance series. And it is the fact that ACC could be approaching its own extinction. Now, I'll only touch briefly on this because I feel like I could go on for hours, and frankly, we don't have that. We have 39 minutes, and we'll go 6 hours on Saturday, so you'll hear plenty of it. But it's that emerging competition from one name and one name in particular, and it's crossed my radar more times than I care to count, but it's Project Motor Racing, and it is looking very likely here to being a toe-for-toe competitor, I should say, with Assetto Corsa Competizione. And really, who could blame them? It was something that I was saying in conversations with a few of these drivers before today's race, and I think it's a case where a lot of people in ACC, at least on console, they're tired. You know, they've had this game as the tip of the spear for console sim racing for years now, uncontested. It used to be a case where much earlier back, and I remember the fleeting months of its relevancy, but it was either original Assetto Corsa or ACC. That was really your two main avenues in hardcore, big quotation marks, sim racing for console. Of course, you always had your third option, which was Dirt Rally 2.0, but again, that hits for a bit of a niche. Not everyone on this grid, I imagine, wants to get behind the wheel of a Rally 2 anytime soon. But ACC is potentially approaching a point where it may be, for the first time in its existence on the console market, be genuinely challenged for its position as one of the most realistic racers for consoles at this time. Now, we don't know 100% of what is coming for Project Motor Racing. Hell, we don't even know if it's going to be anywhere near as sim-y. It's just been a case where a lot of its design ethic and a lot of what we've been shown and what we've been told about with the game is pointing in the direction of this being a much more thoroughbred, hardcore sim title. And if it is to be even, I would say 80% reminiscent of the way this game handles, for a lot of people, that is going to create a mass migration of drivers over towards Project Motor Racing, because it is simply a case of, I want new thing, and new thing is here. There is also that discussion, of course, for 2026, and I think it is the event horizon for this game. If Project Motor Racing doesn't land a fatal blow to ACC's reputation on console, it's going to be Le Mans Ultimate that does. Because as far as I know, a lot of people who have competed in both ACC and Le Mans Ultimate have been able to tell me that the two are very close to one another in terms of real feel, in terms of how the game is sort of behind the wheel there. And of course, for a lot of people, and we've seen that cultural shift, there are still, of course, sprint races asunder. I mean, we're in one right now, and it's a fantastic sprint race format. I think this is, we're seeing a bit of a second renaissance in the form of communities and groups coming through and bringing these oddball ideas to life. And you can see with these Jaguars, on paper, back in its heyday, I don't necessarily know if an XK exclusive series would have ever really took off. But since we're in this era now of broad experimentation in Assetto Corsa Competizione, where we've tried just about everything else in the book, we've tried GT3 races, we've tried GT4 races, we've tried endurance races, we've tried multi-class endurance races, but I think it's a case now where we're able to explore just the last bits of niches here and there, because we're going to be given all of what the community has been searching feverishly for in the last couple of years directly in front of them on a silver platter with PMR and Le Mans Ultimate. I really do see that being the case. You see here, we see Jason Bush in chat. The Jag had a 5-litre V8, but not Ford sourced or produced. It's a British company that developed it, but it sounds too similar to the Ford 5.4 Coyote engine. Kunos just ripped the engine audio from the Jag, and a Ford Mustang GT3 engine sounds. And then he says as well, Project Motor Racing could be a strong, should be a strong choice for sure. I think it's a case, I've heard so many things now about the game, and I've tried to keep myself at least relatively well informed about each game and what's going on with those games at this time. And I've been given a lot of information to work with in regards to that game being the next big thing. We can see into the pits at the moment comes Christian Lebay. Early doors for the pit stops. Now, I wasn't anticipating out of Lebay here for us to be seeing anywhere near the ballpark of a 40-60 style stint pattern here, but earlier than I was definitely expecting. Goes the 119 into the pit box. I saw that. Get that up on the replay. You're right. He made a little wager with me here that he was practicing his pit lane runs for this one. And I hate to put him on blast, but that I feel it a little too compelling not to bring that one up. And stop one and stop two. There we go. Naughty. Down towards the line then. Vincent Simard, I must say, on a great turnaround today. He did start from the pit lane, currently now finds himself just into that top 10. You can also see, having exited the pits recently, Clinton Bourne, now down in 11th place, was even earlier into the pits than Lebay himself. So looking at where things stand right now, we can see Stephen Black emerging down towards turn 1. In front of him there, you can see there's Christian Lebay having emerged down in 9th place after his pit stop. And I must say, that's a bizarre call by Lebay. Normally, we've seen him quite favorable of a 60-40 stint pattern, where he goes a good 60% of that race, then pits. So really, realistically, you're looking like a 60-minute race. He goes in and around. If I want to take the exact maths out of it, it's looking at it here. It's about, looking at it here, about 35 to 40 odd minutes into a race, then pitting, then doing the last 20. It's anywhere in that bracket. Very bizarre call, though. So looking on board here, Byron Forrest now leads in this race. 33 minutes left to go. A very early call by LeBay, but it is not without its reason. He is definitely gunning for that undercut on the majority of this grid, and he will more than likely get it by the end of today's race. He's going to need... Right now, though, where he is, a pretty squeaky clean endeavour over the course of this stint. Back on board with Quain v. Martel, as it has now since picked back up in the last time we've seen it. Now on board with the defending point of view, Carl Martel on his way down through turn 5, down towards turn 6. Under siege here from relentless assault from... sorry, I was on Kevin Quain, sorry, with Carl Martel behind him. But let's actually get on board with Carl Martel. That's our mistake there. Sincerest apologies. So on with Carl Martel's point of view now. We were briefly watching with Kevin Quain, but we've got our wires crossed. And again, sincerest apologies to those two there's. It is still quite late at night for us here in this fight for second place. 32 minutes left to go. We've seen early doors pit calls here for a lot of these drivers. Normally they chance it to after the 30-minute mark. Will either of these two be considering their options, as they both find themselves 4 seconds away from Byron Forrest, who now leads today's race. Of course, we will have to gauge what is the call for the 824. And oh my goodness, a big half spin there, nearly into the wall. That's a brush with the wall, surely. That is into the pits for Carl Martel. Let's just try and piece together what the hell just happened for him out of turn 11. So heading out of turn 10 in towards turn 11, what happened for him there? I mean, it can't be brake lock, surely, because these cars, they do have ABS. I mean, I think it was just a case there. Was it a tiny, tiny little bit of grass again, like we saw with the incident for Carl David Bourdreau? I think so. Yes, actually, yes, it is. So it dirtied his rear left. He got down onto the brakes. Of course, all of that weight is shifting over the left-hand side when you're cornering, and that's just sent him out of line there. Okay, so again, the grass is playing a huge factor in today's race. I really was not expecting just how dramatic of an effect it would have. You can see Kevin Quain is into the pit lane in the 607 alongside Carl Martel. These two previously having been fighting for that second place on the field. LeBay will take both of their positions for ransom there. Up towards 6th he goes. Actually 7th, I should say. Down through turn 1. That's already 2 clear. Now he needs to make an additional 6 before he leads the race once more. 30 minutes left to go then. Carl David Bourdreau, who we saw in that incident from way earlier down towards the run here at the inner loop chicane, finds himself actually quite close company with the number 120 of Vincent Simard, one of the new drivers on the block, chasing him for what is currently 5th on track. Out through turn 5, you see the nose actually get up in the air for the 120 for just a split second. Vincent Simard is doing a full wheelie on the exit of the outer loop. Into the pits then goes Byron Forrest. And it's been a brilliant opening stint for him there. He's been able to carve the gap away from his contemporaries in that top 5. Was actually himself not too far off a chance of challenging the race lead today. We'll see whether or not strategy is on his side. But we'll have to cut away. Yellow flags are out. It's the 99 in trouble. Carl Martel once again seems to be a victim of fate. But does he find himself with any kind of significant damage? You can see there was looking a little bit there of some kind of damage over the splitter, but it didn't look directly as a consequence of recent damage. That kind of just looks like wear and tear. It is brake lock. My word, it is. So get a look at that. I didn't think it was going to be the case where they'd be genuinely locking their brakes. We know that they have, and feel free to correct me, anyone in chat, feel free to correct me. I'm pretty sure these do have ABS. They're not that old. 119. Making his way around turn 11. Meanwhile, in the pit lane is Carl David Bourdreau, Timo de Tosto, and Byron Forrest. The 824 is making his way out of the pits as LeBay passes him. You can see there Byron Forrest emerges back onto the field. Right now will be for provisionally second place, as nearest to him in a challenge for position appears to be Kevin Quain. Yes, you can see there emerging in the foreground, the 6:07, only 1.3 seconds away. Bear in mind, this is actually not the best position to be in for Byron Forrest. He's just emerged from the pits. He's got brand new tyres, which on paper is a fantastic thing to have, but now he's got the main challenge here of sort of breathing some life into those new Pirellis, because one of the major challenges in GT3 over, say, for example, Formula 1, which also uses the Pirelli P0 family of tyres, is these GT3 tyres take a lot more effort compared to the input effort in Formula 1 to put some heat down range. Thinner, skinnier tyres, they don't hold their heat particularly well. These things can end up like hockey pucks at the end of what is otherwise a warm and bright race. They're a harder compound designed for longer forms, longer stints, and maybe a little less G-intensive punishment as the Formula 1 type of Pirelli P0s. Into the pits at the moment, just getting a look on the overlays here. Richard Cecil still remains out, so it's Daniel Poulon and Vincent Simard out. They'll be losing out their positions to Christian Lebay, now up in a second place with the fastest lap, so he's really going headstrong into round two, and where he has missed out on the opportunity for another Grand Slam here, having not led every single lap. Currently, this one being led on lap 18 by Richard Cecil in the number 5. He's gone incredibly long for this one here in Watkins Glen on what seems to have been a lot more of a hesitant performance by all, save for a very select few here, still gunning for the 60-40 style. 99 down towards the line just a moment ago. Carl Martel looking to get 2 positions up there from 7th up to 5th. I say great bounce back though for Carl Martel. He did find himself quite at the short end of the stick over the last 10 minutes. It has really been calamity for him before and after the pit stop. The tyres just not clicking with this setup. You could definitely see where a lot of the problems were coming from. First, it was that tiny touch on the grass down towards turn 11. Then it was that huge brake lock down at turn 6. And then it was this incident the lap before here at the inner loop chicane. So it's been one thing after another, really. A cascading effect for the 99's progress. Heading into the next 25, just under 26 minutes of racing. Let's hope that he can chain things back together here for a decent final flourish here in Watkins Glen as we get over halfway into the American chapter of the Jaguar GT3 Revival Series, powered by Jaguar Transport and Assure Action Transport Expert. Down towards turn 10 and 11, you can see just trailing there in the distance from Byron Forrest is Kevin Quain. 1.2 seconds at the last interval between the pair of them. You can see that Byron Forrest has really not wasted any time here. He's had his Weetabix on his run into round 2 of the championship, and he's breathed life into those tyres effortlessly in that 8.24. Down towards turn 1 he goes. Over the course of that last lap was faster by a factor of about 9 hundredths, I should say there, of a second between himself and Kevin Quain's number 607. Looking for where the nearest fight on track could be coming from at this time. Kevin Quain v Byron Forrest still remains at the forefront of our attention. The closest gap now 1.1 seconds as they enter the back straight. We're on board with Quain's point of view. Previously had our wires crossed in his fight with Carl Martel earlier on, but now we have the undivided attention to focus on Kevin Quain. You can see that Byron Forrest, he has been on completely different form coming into this round of the championship. It was 4th place finish after a few tit-for-tat incidents with drivers such as Kevin Quain over the course of Indianapolis last round, but it really does look to be a turnaround here for Forrest. He finds himself 2 positions up from where he was last round out. 2nd place looking liable here for him. Right now finds himself in 3rd, but after that pit stop coming up at some point in the next 24 minutes for Richard Cecil, who still leads this race, that will be right on the table there for 2nd place. Kevin Quain will be back up to the podium. Just to touch back on something as well that Jason Bush said in chat is that Kunos used the same audio for the Jaguar for the Mustang sounds. I'm pretty sure, and I maybe I'm just going very slightly deaf, but didn't they also do that for the Bentley, which is a very bizarre one when you consider the Bentley's a 4-litre twin-turbo V8, and it has quite a distinctive turbo flutter in a lot of the videos that the car's been seen in. I think one such that springs to mind, I believe it was testing at Monza, and it was quite significantly loud turbo flutter, and that's just not present in the game at all. I suppose it is a little bit jarring now when you consider that the sound for the Ford Mustang did come from this, a 2012 Jaguar with an engine 0.4 of a litre smaller than the 5.4 used in the 7th gen Mustang. Because now this is a sound that's just come to be associated with Ford. I mean, Ford, ever since they came onto the scene here in ACC, has been just a dominant figure. I mean, I'd say it's had a larger shockwave than the arrival of BMW, for that matter. I'd still say it's not anywhere on the level as when the McLaren Evo was added. When the McLaren 720S Evo was added, there was a drastic shift in what was the power balance on ACC. I have not seen a car more ubiquitous in any championship, bar maybe this one for obvious reasons, than the 720S. It has been everywhere. And now the Mustang is too. I mean, take a look over on a series that we've been covering the opening round of, but most recently that second round having passed not long ago, and that was for the exclusive Pro Series, the XCL Pro Series. They just come out of round 2, and again, it was another Ford dominant victory. And I think it was Wilson Gigi, I should say, that took back-to-back wins there, actually having a look back through it. There was a super close fight over the course of that race between Gigi, Sievert, Cyril, and Deesh. And that's 3 of those 4 cars were manufactured by Ford, the 4th of which being an Aston Martin, which you go down the tree far enough and that's a Ford in its own right. I think it's a case where he's just a dominant figure now. So it's kind of hard not to hear the engine in these Jaguars, even though this is where the sound comes from. So, coming away from Kevin Quain is in the time where we spent almost insanely rambling about engine noises and ACC meta. We've now found ourselves at the forefront of the action here for Richard Cecil into the pit lane then after 40 minutes of racing. So, quite a long-winded strategy here for Cecil. Down towards the line he goes then. Only 4 corners away from him is Christian Lebay. So, it's really a case of inevitability. The 119. It is not a factor of if he'll get the position back, it's when he will. There seems that 3 things are all but certain here at Watkins Glen in this Jaguar series right now. Death, taxes, and Lebay leading the charge. 20 minutes left to go, and the 119 set to return to the leading position here, up towards the front of the pack with the fastest lap uncontested by all accounts so far. Looking further down into the top 10, we find now still inside of the top 10, so great hustle considering he started from the pit lane, where he may not be up in the 6th position he qualified in. Vincent Simard on debut has made his way back to the top 10 through grit and determination here with just a little under 20 minutes left to go. He still has chances for a top 10 finish on debut, and that's great considering where things started out today. Daniel Poulin finds himself in great stead, now currently 7th on the field and ahead of Carl David Bourdreau and Clinton Bourne. Right now finds himself 20 seconds off the beat of Timo de Tosto. Of course, he was caught up in quite a lot of the calamity from earlier on. We are down a car, and I believe it is the number 18 of Julio Bahena. And really, given how things panned out for him, it was such a hopeful start for Bahena, and then it all came asunder. It would not be too harsh on him to suggest that maybe he's got his reasons for having left today, because in his position, I wouldn't have been able to progress past that first spin. I would have been seeing red past that point. And I think that's maybe what divides me from the drivers. And that's why I sit in the commentary box. Timo de Tosto then, 6th fastest. Well, not 6th fastest, sorry, 6th in the race. It's mine still miles back, of course. De Tosto 6th in today's race, 3.2 seconds off of Carl Martel. I must say, on a story of great hustles get a gander for Timo de Tosto. I mean, he's up inside of that top 10, and he is a force to be reckoned with. We've been saying earlier on in today's race, he was on the warpath, and I really would say that is the best bit of vernacular to choose to describe his performance today, because he has been this unstoppable force on the field. Dread it, run from it. The 58 will eventually arrive. Catching back on with Kevin Quain. He does find himself now 3 seconds down the road on that last lap just gone. He found himself about 0.3 of a second slower than Byron Forrest. Now, this can also be attributed to the fact that Byron Forrest in the very latter parts of this lap just gone just got a hefty bit of slipstream from Stephen Black, the 707, having to move over for the 824, now having since done so before turn 1. The gap right now is 10 seconds and seemingly, by the looks of it here, and let's not get too ahead of ourselves, but seemingly dropping between Christian Lebay and Byron Forrest. Now, is it by a factor large enough to consider these two perhaps in a fight for the leading position in the next 17.5 minutes? I'm not entirely sure I'd go that far, but the signs are there. Had this been perhaps a 2-hour race, you could definitely make the suggestion with progress in this way, it wouldn't take him too far off of a little over where we've got today to catch up to the 119, but that's really depending on what is the current modus operandi of Christian Lebay at this length of the race. He's already gone for the early undercut strategy. He's paved the red carpet forward for a second victory this season. The question is he going to be hurrying himself to the checkered flag, knowing that even at almost a super cruise-like relaxed speed, he's not really got too much in the way of worrying about things. He's double figures up the road from any one driver at this time for position. See right now, just trying to get around Alex Albert on his way down through turn 11. The 36 to the outside very nearly clips the wall. You can see it is very dicey, and that's just for a blue flag condition. Imagine that for a position in today's race. That is just how sketchy things get through there. One slip up, you're either in on the inside, as we saw earlier on today for Carl Martel, or you're in that wall on the left-hand side. And we've seen some catastrophic incidents come out of that wall in Watkins Glen's history here on TRTN. Right now, it seems that a lot of the battling for greater intents and purposes has all but dissipated as the drivers now settle themselves in for the final 15 or so minutes of today's race. You can see the gap now at its physical extent, 3.8 seconds between Quain and Forrest, where Forrest was just about to enter the inner loop chicane. Quain was just making his way onto the start of that back straight. So really, there's quite a lot of time to be had between the pair of them. Looking at where things stand overall with 15.5 minutes left to go right now, Christian Lebay leads the charge by 9.9 seconds at that last interval, just scraping under 10 seconds to Byron Forrest in second place. He was at a brilliant defense of second after taking it off of Quain there by 0.07 of a second at the end of qualifying. It has been a phenomenal defense by the 824. Kevin Quain, though, let's not scoff at his performance either. Very consistent on the board there to put himself third at the end of qualifying. It could have been second had it not been for that last lap dash for the 824 Forrest. Quain has been able to tooth and nail defend any advance to third place. He holds onto it by a country mile at the moment. Richard Cecil in fourth place. That is a great hustle for the number 5 today. Carl Martel down in 5th. He's had a bit of a spottier performance than I imagine he'd like this far in to round 2 of the championship, but of course still very early doors in the grand scheme of things, so great opportunities further down the line where this might not be the 99's day. You couldn't make that that call too early on that it won't be his season. I think this is just a flash in the pan really for Martel's performance. He's 6th in the championship. Right now he'll be set to continue to gain solid points. I don't think right now he's liable to losing any positions out come round 3 of the championship at the Circuit of the Americas. Further down the line, Timo de Tosto in 6th place, and this has been a brilliant little performance indeed from the 58. Let's not scoff at what is very clear to us right now with de Tosto actually having yet to have scored any points in the championship. This is his first round in, already to have forced his way from the back of the field up towards the front, or near enough the front by comparison when we're talking 50-50s here. That is still very impressive indeed. We have just seen reconnecting to the sessions, so it seems, was Daniel Poulon, the 44. as we saw him reappear on the charts, now down at 12th place, and with a stop-go 30-second penalty, now that's been resolved to him being in 13th, so that was a disconnect for the 44. That can't be the greatest of news. It was a great race for him so far, but now it has come apart after one disconnect. Of course, it wouldn't be ACC without someone's internet screwing them over. Lord only knows. I don't know what that feels like. Lest we forget Season 8 VSR Phoenix Barcelona. I will never forgive my internet service provider for that one. 13 minutes left to go then. Looking further down from behind Ditosto, we see Carl David Bourdreau in 7th place. And again, a great result for him so far. He has carved his way up through the field. He's found himself at the centre of some great fights. He's found himself actually very nearly into the wall on a number of occasions. Namely, we saw that incident down in the inner loop chicane where he caught just the tiniest blade of grass, but now he serves as a brilliant case example as to what one needs to do to avoid that grass there, and why you should, because that tiny little spot of grass created such a big problem for him there. Unfortunately, he was able to avoid any major collisions with either of the walls there. I think he got that very lucky out through the inner loop chicane. Clinton Bourne finds himself down in 8th place ahead of Vincent Simard, who now after that disconnect for Daniel Poulin finds himself up from 10th into 9th. So I'm sure he'll be quite delighted with that turnaround. Alex Albert now up into the top 10 because of that disconnect. And now that pushes Stephen Black up to 11th and Andrew Veldkamp up to 12th. As I believe we are also without another driver. We did start with... actually, no, we did start with 14 drivers. So it was Bahena as the first DNF. Poulin right now in the pits, serving his stop-go 30-second penalty. 12 minutes left to go then, just a little under actually when you look at the timers there, 11 minutes 50 before the end of round 2 of the championship, and things are still a little bit tepid here in the final chapter at round 2 compared to where things were in Indianapolis. Looking on here with Byron Forrest just down towards the line. You can see up the road from him there. That is Alex Albert down in 10th place. So it really does go to show just how far up the road that top 3 is from anyone else on this field. Moreover, I think it goes great lengths to show just how far up the road Christian LeBay is from the rest of the podium. He finds himself double figures once more. And that actually behind him there, that is, I believe... yes, that's Daniel Poulin. That's in 13th. He's recently just served his stop-go 30-second penalty, so he's now cleared to race the next 10 minutes, hopefully with no further issue. Sadly, though, that will leave him without that result he was hoping for. He was up in 6th place before his disconnect there, now down to 13th. You can see running wide in towards turn 6, into the wall goes the 44, and that was... quite painful to watch, to be fair. You saw the understeer happen right off the bat, and it's like watching something stuck in front of a train line there. There's very little that he could do on his end to stop that from happening. You can see here that Simard very close to Bourne. Now, I wasn't expecting a battle to erupt so quickly, but you can see quite pressing signs here for Clinton Bourne of some serious damage on the nose of the number 6. Out through turn 11, will there be even the hesitation to come into the pits? Not with such a close amount of time left in today's race, so we will have to catch on board with these two in just a moment's time as we go across the field here on board with Clinton Bourne on the defending of 2 on his way uphill. Right out of turn 1, pressed all the way for it up towards turns 2, 3, and 4. Right on his tail is Vincent Simard. Now, this is dangerously close when you consider a little bit of that desync. Of course, Vincent Simard competing from Canada, but Clinton Bourne competing from Australia. So he does find himself playing with fire a little bit on his way down the back straight. You can see Simard side by side now looking for the inside of the inner loop chicane. This is for 8th place here, down towards the inner loop chicane we go, but Bourne goes wide, a little bit of a tap on the rear bumper, but he did send it And ballsy as it may be, he has held on to 8th, much to the chagrin there of Vincent Simard, who would have otherwise very much so liked the position off of him. This is still all going on for that fight of 8th place. Let's stay on board with these two. They've already given us a very solid opening act. Out through turn 6, you can see understeer striking at the nose there of Clinton Bourne, but it leaves him on the inside, so he's able to squeeze all the way to the left there, but Simard maybe has a few tricks or so up his sleeve. No, as he finds himself a little too far away to have tried for a pretty ballsy lunge down through turn 7. You can see there, just omnipresent in the rear view mirror of the number 6. Clinton Bourne is under quite a tremendous bit of pressure here after whatever went on for his number 6 Jaguar. There is very clear signs of damage, so to have put him this close to the nose of the 120 would have indicated that he got himself into some kind of incident, whether self-inflicted or through other drivers. We do not yet know. This actually could just be the case here. We've not been paying too close of a bit of attention here to these two, and this has been actually a long time coming. Of course, we'll get all that confirmation in due course. Out through turn 11 we go then. You can see a broad difference in line there. Simard not looking to run the risks of getting anywhere near the wall. Clinton Bourne using absolutely every available inch, and coming out of that last lap, he was 2/10 up over Simard. So a lot of that time being made up, as we saw there, through that final sector. But through the first sector, it is absolutely on the 120 at this time. You can see just closing him in, reeling him in there. That excessive drag generated by a damaged nose cone is crippling the number 6 in its efforts to escape the 120. And now side by side for the second lap running, this could be it for Clinton Bourne down towards the inner loop chicane. He can't go any later on the brakes, but as we saw there, that was right on the upper limit as the 120 had to cut across the inner loop. So really trying the envelope here. The number 6 showed us exactly where the limit was. Vincent Simard fortunate to come out the other side of that with very little, if any, damage at all, save for a little bit of a bump there over the inner loop chicane. Was very close to calamity in the 120. He's up to 8th place. Clinton Bourne down to 9th. See very close action here. This is just for lapping of position. Timo Tosto over Stephen Black out through the S's, up through turns 2, 3 and 4 on the way to the back straight. 6.5 minutes left to go. You can see the gap between Martel and De Tosto, 3.5 seconds. Now, we discussed this before. This was namely in the chances for Byron Forrest. Admittedly, that was about 11 minutes ago, over whether or not you could catch Christian Lebay. I'd say it's much likelier, given this strength, this length of time, I should say, that De Tosto, if he really knuckles down here, if he uses absolutely 110% of everything he's got left in that Jaguar, could possibly reel in Martel for a top 5 scrap. I would not see it impossible at this time, as we've already seen what dauntless progress he's brought to the table. I mean, it is boundless pace from that 58. I imagine had it been just a slightly better qualifying session, he could have contended for a podium. With progress like that, you really can't argue with the kind of performance the 58's brought to the table, considering that he's clawed his way up through to be in 6th place right now. Kevin Quain down towards the line, but he's 7 seconds now off the beat of Byron Forrest. I don't necessarily think there's going to be, sadly, another fight in the podium. I think that ship has definitely sailed. You can see, though, things are getting, again, still quite close. This is from the point of view of Carl Martel, now the would-be defending driver of 2 in that fight for 5th. As you can see, the gap still hovers rather precariously at that 3-second mark. In the last lap there, a 146.6 to a 146.5 does spell a pretty clear sign here. And unless Carl Martel can find a couple more hundredths to spare either side of things, he is being reeled in slowly but surely. 5 minutes left to go, functionally 4, perhaps 3 more laps, if determined there by the leading 119. Before the end of round 2 of the championship. So that could be one to watch here. 3.1 seconds. That could shift at a moment's notice. Catching back on board with the most recent battle just past, Vincent Simard versus Clinton Bourne. That now has jumped out to 4 seconds. That is run and done. Deal sealed for the 120, up to 8th place there. So long as he can keep things in the clear and narrow. 4.5 minutes left to go. And oh, I may not speak too soon there for the 120. That was very close to trouble for Vincent Simard. Let's get a look here on the instant replays. Very good car control by him to keep himself out of any trouble as he currently makes his way down through turn 1. This is out of turn 11 on your main screens here. And look at that there. Slides his way through turn 11. That could have been disaster for him. Gap now hovers at 3 seconds. Clinton Bourne actually seemingly reeling him in after that incident at turn 11. 4 minutes left to go. See, there's Clinton Bourne, and now as we check in with the number 6 once again, we can start to get a little bit more of a scope as just how bad the damage on the nose of that Jaguar is. And seeing down towards turn 6 hopefully will give us a bit of a clearer indication. You can see it's hanging there off of its mountings, and it's been creating just a little pocket of drag there in the gap between itself and the bonnet. Moreover, it's been a little bit, by the looks of it, they're scraping against the road surface itself. So down that back straight with the wind rushing in north of 110, 120 miles an hour over the nose of that Jaguar as he makes his way from turn 4. Actually, could be 130 if I'm not mistaken on these Jaguars as well, as I know their top end is way further beyond that. Just on the exit of turns 3 and 4, where it's beating down on the nose of that, he's not doing him any favours, and that's ultimately what's cost him that position over the 120. Everywhere else, I'd say he was actually pretty solid. Especially considering the damage on the nose. That excess drag could have actually been helping him in some regards. Maybe a little less controllable than a normal setup, of course. But yeah, that has definitely been his Achilles, is this sudden bit of nose damage. It's what brought him into that fight in the first place, as he's dropped all the way back onto the nose of the 120. And then ultimately it's what lost him that fight. You can see reeling in from the background there out of turn 11. That's the 119 of Christian LeBay. Now we are on for 2 more laps, this being the start of it. On lap 32, so it seems, therefore, LeBay. We'll be catching on with him next lap around. We're taking a look here as Timo de Tosto is still pulling true on the promise that he could potentially catch Karl Martel in the next 2 laps. The gap currently 2.1 seconds. I'm sure the 99 is starting to feel the heat here of de Tosto. Slowly but surely reeling him in. This could be the final fight of today. I won't speak too soon on the matter, as anything can and will happen. The gap currently, though, has been sliced down from 3 seconds to 2. It's not looking grand if you're Karl Martel, because Timo de Tosto, he is closing in and closing in at a rate of knots in the 58, I should say, in the 58. So on board with Timo de Tosto, this could get quite spicy here, because we're seeing it's almost incremental. It's every single lap he's gained slightly more and more and more over the top of the last. Case in point as to how he's been able, in the course of about 4 minutes, draw a second onto Karl Martel. Now, with this being the penultimate lap for these two, as dictated by the 119, who will be rounding turns 8, 9, 10, and 11 to start that final lap in a moment's time, this will be their penultimate lap running, as it will be only until the leader crosses the line to when their race is finally over. See, the Martel has started to get a wriggle on here. He has been maybe pocketing a little bit of the performance on those tyres. He's been keeping things nice and mellow, much like we saw actually out of Christian LeBay not long ago, just keeping the car nice and controlled. And especially in the case of Martel, you can see why he's done that, because he's had quite a few issues with that Jaguar already. The brakes haven't been working for him. The tyres have not been heating up the way he wanted them to. Moreover, he's been struggling with the track limits and the grass. So you can see why the 99 has tapered things off, but he may have done that a little too late, because that gap's now 1.7 seconds. He's in the danger zone. He can be caught if he doesn't do something about it right now, because the leader's on the final lap. There's no stopping what's been set in motion already. Christian LeBay is not too far from consecutive victories here in the Jaguar GT3 Revival, but our focus right now could be on a last lap dash here by de Tosto. 1.8 seconds off the mark of being in the top 5. Even if he doesn't take this mark now, he has still had a phenomenal race by all accounts. I'll have to catch on board with these two a little later on, as we now take a look around the field to see the point of view here of Kevin Cranel. Looks to be finishing on the podium alongside Byron Forrest. Those two reveling in a fantastic performance. We can see, though, trouble for the number 6. Let's see if we can catch on board here. And that appears to be with Clinton Bourne. He's come to a stop, and that's the end of the road for Clinton Bourne on the final lap of racing here in round 2 of the championship. It has come to a bitter end for the Australian. Lord knows where he'll finish there. We'll get a full comprehensive breakdown of the standings as and when we can, but we're now catching on board with the race leader, as we are not too far from the checkered flag here. in round 2 of the championship. On board with Christian LeBay, makes his way out of turn... Actually, yeah, out of turn 9, a little bit of a snap there on the 119. In through turn 10 he goes. And so it seems, making his way down towards the line in a moment's time. He has had an unstoppable second round of the championship. 2 on the trot then, as he goes back-to-back for race wins here in the Jaguar GT3 Revival Series. Christian LeBay wins in Watkins Glen. Unbelievable stuff there. Actually, I'd say more and more, you have to start believing it as it is the truth. LeBay back-to-back for wins. Byron Forrest to the line on a fantastic defence of second place. His first podium of the season, and I'm sure he'll be absolutely delighted with that. Kevin Quain in a much the same boat there. First podium of the season for the 607, if my memory serves me correctly, and he has defended very elegantly for that position. Richard Cecil on a brilliant result as well. 4th place for the number 5. He has had a brilliant race as well. Carl Martel on his way down towards the line here, and fortunately has just done enough to evade the sights of Timo de Tosto. 5th place for Martel after a few hiccups in today's race. For Timo de Tosto, a brilliant 6th place, clawing through the field to do that. And the same story seems to be that of Carl David Bourdreau. We've seen him on the ups and downs of today's field. Right now. Get a gander of that. Wrap your head around that. And for him right now, he's going to be finding himself in 7th place. You can see that the mental fatigue is just setting in now because it is 2 in the morning. Oh, Lord have mercy. Down towards the line then, out of turn 9. Then comes, turn 10, I should say, in towards turn 11. Comes Carl David Bourdreau, much in the same boat as Timo de Tosto, has clawed his way up the field for 7th place today. Same story as well, actually, for Vincent Simard on his opening round here. This is his debut drive. And what a drive to remember, where he may have started from the pit lanes. He can revel in 8th place there. Great result for the 120 on debut. He celebrates thereby slamming into the walls. Down towards... Actually, I was going to say down towards the line because we were just checking to see what was the story there for the number 6 of Clinton Bourne. But no, sadly, that's the end of the line. He'll be 12th for the end of today's race. Checking in there with the 99... It's Carl Martel. Alongside him there, you can see that's Alex Albert and Stephen Black there. So that's looking at it for our drivers here, 5th, 9th and 11th. Donuts and celebration there for Alex Albert. He finishes 9th today ahead of Veldkamp and Black. Get a full result in a moment's time. Bottom line though, Christian LeBay, your winner in round 2 of the championship. Back-to-back victories for the 119. Byron Forrest and Kevin Quain on their first podium appearances of the season. Those two defended mightily for their coveted spots, 2nd and 3rd. For Richard Cecil, it was a great result today as well, as this is his first points contribution on the charts there after a DNS in round 1. This is a great way to start your season, albeit a little bit late, but better late than never for the number 5. Same story for Timo de Tosto, who finishes 6th today. Carl Martel finishing 5th will look to continue to build on his gap right now from 6th upwards in the championship. So heading to Kota, it's onwards and upwards for the 99 after a muddled round today. So there's your 4 results. Not Kevin Quain. Sorry, Kevin Quain is 3rd, but Christian LeBay wins here in Watkins Glen. Byron Forrest in 2nd, Kevin Quain 3rd, Richard Cecil 4th, Carl Martel 5th, Timo de Tosto in 6th, Carl David Bourdreau 7th, Vincent Simard in 8th, Alex Albert 9th, and Andrew Veldkamp in 10th, Stephen Black in 11th, Clinton Bourne in 12th, and Daniel Poulin in 13th. Julio Bahena, our only DNF in today's race after a very, very sudden shift in fate for them. Well, that's the end of the road here for us on TRTN. If you're wondering where we're going to be in regards to this championship, well, you'll find us next week in Austin, Texas for the 3rd round of the championship on November 4th at the Circuit of the Americas. That'll be November 5th, early morning for our European viewers at home here in the UK. So that is all from us here on TRTN, and have a wonderful rest of your evening or morning or afternoon from wherever it is you are in the world. Take care. Good night.